Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the new news. I hope you're all doing great today. I apologize for the late start. There was a lot of developments going on rather quickly, a lot of them a little late. And also, I was having a little bit of technical difficulties. We had some storms come through here yesterday, and there's been some pretty high winds in my area of the U.S. today that has kind of wreaked a little bit of havoc, and I think we're having a little bit of internet issues. So I want to apologize in advance. I know we're a little late, but the show must go on regardless. There's a lot of news to cover today. And so I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone is safe. I know that there are some pretty big storms going on in the U.S. that included several tornadoes. I know that there's a lot of stuff, a lot of flooding going on in India and South Africa, and there's a lot going on in Europe, of course, with Ukraine. So I hope everyone's doing well today, especially because I know that there's just a lot of not so great things going on, and I know it's probably impacting a lot of those that are watching today. And if you want to check out in the description below, we do have humanitarian efforts currently going on. You can support Ukraine, whether that's through humanitarian efforts or through the war effort with Come Back Alive. You can go there and check them out. We also have other humanitarian efforts going there, including the World Central Kitchen. We have the International Rescue Committee. All sorts of different things. So go and check them out. We also have an ongoing campaigns in the description for Somalia and the Horn of Africa, which has been heavily affected by an ongoing drought. Currently, 90% of the country is dry. 350,000 people are expected to die of the 1.4 million that are already dealing with malnutrition. And so we want to go ahead and bring that campaign forward, and we also want to make sure that people know about it, because while the war in Ukraine is currently a big deal, we don't want it to also drown out the other things that are going on in the world that are affecting millions of people. A lot of the aid that was going to a lot of these countries, including Somalia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, all of these areas part of it was diverted for the emergencies that happened in Ukraine. And so now more than ever, those places also need our help. So let's go ahead and, if you can't give a lot, give a little to these causes, so that way we can at least put some good back in the world after all of the bad stuff that's been happening. And finally today, I'm sure for those that know and that have noticed, there are a lot of yellow dots today, and yellow dots mean good things for Ukraine, generally speaking, or things that are Ukraine focused. Red dots are Russia focused during this conflict. And so lately we've been having a lot of bad news and a lot of things that just I really don't enjoy reporting on. I don't think anyone does. Very solemn duty to be reporting on some of these things, such as the atrocities that have been ongoing, the constant bombardments. But today we have good news. We also have a little bit of bad news, but we do have mostly good. And the first thing I want to focus on here is the cleanup that continues in the city of Irpin. Now, Irpin, Bucha, Hostomel, all of these areas were originally liberated earlier this month after Russian forces officially withdrew from the northern territories. However, that doesn't seem to have stopped too much from happening here, as we will get to here in a few minutes. However, the cleanup continues, and there's a lot of destroyed and abandoned cars on the side of the road. There's just a lot of stuff that they have to go through. EOD in this area, or explosive ordnance disposal, continues to go through and find hundreds and hundreds and thousands of unexploded munitions, whether that they were purposely laid behind, if they were set like booby traps or mines that were left behind as Russian forces left the area, or whether that's just from the shelling and the bombings and the fighting that took place in these regions, and as just an unfortunate result of it. But we can see today as the cleanup continues within this area. And this is probably going to take a long time. And I mean, it will probably take years and years and years, maybe probably even to an extent a decade or more to actually clean out this area. To give you an idea, in Vietnam, they are still dealing with landmines and bombs that have been dropped during the Vietnam War all across Asia and places that were occupied by Japanese forces and all across Europe. In fact, in France, as you go up into the Ardennes and around the areas of such as Verdun, there are places that are still so littered with ordnance from World War I that it's too dangerous to go in them. You're not allowed to go there. It's simply, and this is from World War I, let alone World War II, which had significantly more firepower that was brought to bear in these very same areas. But it's just so hazardous just from the World War I munitions to be going through. In fact, every year, part of the things that people in France have to do and farmers in France have to do is when they go to plow the fields, they have areas on the side of the fields where they will literally take munitions that they cultivate up when they're digging up that ground and plowing it, getting ready for to plant every year. And they put it on the side of the road, and French EOD has to come out and destroy those munitions because so much is left over in France alone. We'll probably see something similar with Ukraine because the amount modern warfare is no better way to describe it other than impressive in the amount of firepower that can be brought to bear. And as the amount of firepower increases, so does the amount of unexploded ordnance. And so I'm sure after this war is over, there will be very long-term repercussions for the country of Ukraine and for Europe as a whole as all this stuff is laying around. Every dud that was fired, every grad rocket that had a dud, every single bomb that dropped and fell into the mud and just didn't go off, every landmine, every round that just was a dud and didn't fire. All of that stuff is a hazard. However, we do have Cartridge the bomb sniffing dog. And Cartridge is someone who has been seen on this channel before. Very adorable little dog. He is still in the northwestern part of the Kiev Oblast. And he has so far, according to Ukrainian EOD, has found over 150 different pieces of unexploded ordnance. And so he actually, today we found a new photo op here on Reddit of our good boy Cartridge, also known as Patron, being just the good boy that he is. An amazing dog. Of course, as playful as any other dog would be. But we've seen him around here before. We've had videos of him earlier when he's a little bit of good news coming out of Ukraine, and it's very, very nice to be able to see him still doing great things and being one of the goodest boys in such a bad time. However, air raid sirens have been going on across the entire country of Ukraine tonight. Currently, as we are talking, air raid sirens in Ukraine are going off all across the country. This comes as there have been multiple reports of artillery attacks across the entire country. We have heard that we don't know the true extent of this. However, we do know that there were reports of explosions in the Kiev Oblast today, earlier tonight, and this is one of the reasons why it took so long, amongst several others, because we had a lot of information coming out very late. I apologize that those videos weren't necessarily the best quality, but I probably wouldn't be standing there filming too much if there was that powerful of an explosion going off close enough to set off my car alarm. So I don't blame him one bit. But as we can see, there is a lot of stuff currently going on in the country of Ukraine that is a little bit concerning tonight. However, part of that cleanup that I was talking about that's going to be affecting the country of Ukraine means that, as we see here, reportedly a tractor driver, a farmer, was actually killed today in the Chernihiv region after his tractor hit a Russian mine that had yet to be cleaned up. And so this is reportedly left behind after they had left from the region. As we can see there, what's left of this Ukrainian farmer's tractor. And while this is kind of the first incident we've really showed of something like this, I'm sure it's not the very first that has occurred thus far. Maybe the first one we've been able to find, but not the first in total, and it will definitely not be the last. There will likely be a lot more images of this kind of stuff happening. And so, as we move down here towards Kharkiv, we can see that the Russian shelling doesn't stop. In fact, Gorky Park, which is an amusement park in the center of Kharkiv, we could not tell of any kind of military targets in this area, but yet it seems to have been purposely shelled by Russian forces. This continues as heavy Russian shelling has occurred all across the country, in Kharkiv especially, as there's now a rejuvenated cause along this front and as well as in the Donbass. And so we will see probably more instances of Russian shelling in the days to come in the lead up to their major offensive, which is going to be considered their second phase. So we can actually see that here. We have videos of the shelling of Gorky Park. And so let's take a look. Sorry that had copyrighted music. But as you can see, it's rather a... It's nothing more than an amusement park. It's a place for children at one point to have gone and visited and to have enjoyed. It's not really a military target. I didn't see a single military target, and I'm pretty sure we viewed almost the entire park in the different cuts of that today. So I don't see any reason why that would have been shelled, other than the fact that there is nothing but more at this point than indiscriminate shelling. Russian forces have been shelling for months now heavily populated areas, residential areas, business centers, and they haven't been using any kind of precision strikes. These are mass saturation volleys, usually, of things such as grad munitions, mortars, fixed artillery such as the DP-30s. And so I'm sure this will continue. However, that doesn't stop anyone from trying to go and recover their belongings. And as we can see here, a Ukrainian man got to the roof of his building because he couldn't get to his apartment the normal way, rappelled down. However, he did this as parts of the building began to collapse. Nobody was injured, but pretty interesting footage, to say the least, to see people trying to go and get their belongings even in such deplorable conditions. And it is not recommended. I do not at all recommend doing this. Wait until it is safe, and your life isn't worth any of the belongings in your home at this point. I promise you that. So if anyone is in the country and has belongings that they wish to recover, wait. It is not worth it, and you are going to see why. It's just not worth it, folks. So once again, if you are in one of these affected areas that you're really wanting to go and recover your belongings, as much as I hate to say this, it just isn't worth it. It's not worth your life to go and get items. I know a lot of people have sentimental things, and I know that's coming as an outsider, but these places are extremely dangerous. the crews in Ukraine, the first responders in Ukraine, the fire department, the police department, medical personnel, who aren't talked about nearly as much as the Ukrainian troops, but they are working day in and day out, and they have been doing this nonstop for 50 days now. And they honestly don't need more injuries and more people they have to rescue from people that are taking very big risks just to get their property back. So while I understand there's a lot of sentimental value once again with some items that may have been left behind, in the grand scale of things, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for you to lose your life over, and it's not worth it to tie up even more exhausted Ukrainian first responders who are already working at well over their maximum capacity just to deal with the war wounded and those trapped in the rubble from these bombardments. And near Izium today, we got reports that a bridge was destroyed by Russian forces as they were attempting to cross. This comes as the Ukrainian special forces apparently planted explosives underneath the bridge and then detonated them as Russian forces, as a resupply convoy, has been moving to reinforce the front near Izium. It is actually at this point believed that this little bulge here is actually going to be one of the major points of advance for this renewed offensive. So as we can take a look here, we'll be able to see some of this destruction. Completely, I mean, those two Kamza trucks they're done. They're not getting used anymore. This one's entire backside is completely burned out. Pretty sure a piece of cement crushed whoever was driving it on this one. Yeah, that's not good. That's not how you want to start your day in Ukraine if you're a Russian. Same thing here. So you can see there they planted a pretty hefty amount of explosives underneath this bridge. It was not going to end well for whoever crossed it. And as we can see, it was used to great effect, and that bridge can no longer be used by Russian forces trying to cross that little creek there. And in the Donbass today, we've had a lot more activity. So we've seen that there has been massive amounts of destruction in Popasna. We've seen some small offensives, some probing offensives in the area. We've seen the use of what appears to be white phosphorus. We know that there's been heavy fighting in this part of the Luhansk. But much like other regions, it has taken a pretty heavy toll. Much like scenes we have seen before in Kharkiv and Mariupol, in Kherson, in Kiev, and Irpin, we've seen more burned out, bombed out civilian infrastructure. This will not be the last point in which this happens, in which this occurs, but it definitely is yet another instance of another city in Ukraine that is going to take a long time to recover. And it's probably not going to get any better, as we know that this area will be contested for some time, and the main offensive from Russia is not believed to have begun yet. They're in their last moments of preparing, reportedly, and this is coming from Ukrainian intelligence. Ukrainian intelligence, the U.S. Department of Defense, does not believe that they are in place yet, but in the coming hours and days, they will be. So that is the concern, and even with these minor attacks, the damage is already considerable, let alone when that occurs. The death toll reportedly raised by 2 in Kramatorsk today. Kramatorsk was the train station which was packed with civilians trying to flee the Eastern Front, and ahead of the renewed offensive in the region, was hit by a Tochka U missile that was reportedly fired by Russia. Russia denies these claims, saying that they don't even have Tochka U's, which we debunked here on the channel. And 2 more children reportedly died of their injuries that they sustained during the blast on the train station, raising the death toll to, I mistyped here, is now 54, including 7 children. And I will actually correct that here. It was originally 52. And we can actually see here the remains of that Tosh what was left of it after the detonation. And so, a little bit of a solemn bit of news there. We haven't heard of anyone else who has succumbed to their injuries at this point. This is the first two. It appears I may have hit the wrong button there. See, this is what happens when I keybind things. Okay, we're back. I apologize. It's a little bit of a it's a little bit weird. I have the hotkeys on my number pad actually for the stream, so I just used my number pad to correct that, and it did not work out for me very well. So I do apologize. The stream is not ending. There's still plenty of news to continue, but I did correct on screen the 54 casualties total now, including 7 children. And once again, I apologize. In all intents and purposes, we're still relatively new and we're working out the kinks here. So hopefully in the future we can avoid some of these issues. But once again, I do apologize. And we'll return here to the news. And now we're going to move into Donetsk. And we can see that a Ukrainian 30mm autocannon was seen destroying Russian forces in the Donetsk region. This is something that's been circulating today heavily. And so we wanted to go ahead and make sure this is added. We originally, whenever I have found this, today it has been said as a location unknown. We're finally able to pinpoint that to the Donetsk region. So, no audio with this clip. But as you can see, that I believe it is a BTR-82A is currently laying some heavy suppression down on Russian forces here in the Donetsk region. As we can see, a large explosion, lots of fire going on right now. So they hit something, and it did not go very well for the Russian forces. We have seen so far. Here we got a little bit of a video, more of it today. But we have seen Ukrainian forces really using, they really haven't had to field a whole lot. There were some videos circling around from earlier in the war where there was one Ukrainian tank just wreaking havoc on an entire convoy of Russian forces. And realistically, in warfare, the advantage goes to the defender. Whenever you're talking about one country or assaulting a region, the advantage will go to the defender. And so when there's a lot of things coming into play, seeing as Russian forces are sitting at essentially a 1-to-1 match with Ukraine at this point. Ukraine's their fighting forces are essentially equal. The airspace is still contested, which means that that Russia can't even bring that into their advantage. They are the Ukrainians are well supplied. They've been using small unit tactics to significant advantage. They have a non-commissioned officer corps, which is something the Russians don't have, which means that their chain of command isn't is easily disrupted. And so it's been a very interesting fight. A lot of this is also coming down to morale issues. The Russians are suffering defeat after defeat after defeat. They're suffering impressive losses to be sustaining to even continue a military operation, let alone trying to make a drive with one. And so there's morale issues coming into play that have also heavily affected Russian forces. And Ukraine has, for every, it seems like, convoy or BTG, Ukraine just seems to be sending, limited assets, what limited assets they can, and they make the most of what they got. We've seen in Mariupol where BTRs were taking on just massive amounts of Russian troops and equipment, including tanks, and winning. So they got a little, and they're making a lot out of it. And we can see this today as they captured yet another T-72 here in Donetsk. One that's actually, it looks for the most part to be in relatively good shape. Actually, it just looks like it may have been detract, but not significant damage, at least from what I can tell. So, yet another win. That's something they can immediately turn around and use against them, as it is currently shaping up to be the largest pitched armored battle since World War II. That is what the Donbass so far, with the forces being deployed on both sides, is shaping up to be, is the largest open field pitched battle since World War II. And the terrain is going to have a lot to do with that, because up here in the northern part, where we are seeing Ukrainian forces be able to kind of outflank, outmaneuver, then really use this terrain to their advantage, very heavily wooded and urban terrain, not very good for tank warfare and maneuver warfare. Ukrainians just pummeled the Russian forces repeatedly, held them in place until they just couldn't take it anymore and they left. It's going to be a little bit different here in the Donbass, because these are much more open plains, much more suitable to large-scale maneuvers, which is something the Russian military actually kind of trains to do. This means, and they're also not worried about multiple axes of advance, which means they're trying to do multiple different directions. Not very great if you're using large armored forces. Now they have one real front, and they just basically have to get online and push. And that is kind of what armored warfare and maneuver warfare is more suited to. So when I was talking about Kramatorsk earlier and Izium being an axis, Kramatorsk is a major railhead and a major crossroads in this region. You can see that there's a bulge here where they're trying to make an axis of advance. And you can see where they're kind of lining up here in this U shape. And then it kind of just tapers off here as they are planning on just kind of defending this area along the Dnipro River and then up along the plains. But you can see that that if they make heavy drives from this side and this side, they can really envelop Ukrainian forces here in the pocket. Which seems to be, and at least this is kind of coming from different strategists, former generals. The Department of Defense has hit on a little bit, seems to be what the Russian strategy may be, is kind of an large-scale encirclement and capturing Kramatorsk as a key city, because that will free up a little bit of logistics issues they would have, and also sever Donetsk. So it's kind of interesting. We'll see how that goes, but it's going to be a much different type of warfare than what we were seeing earlier on the war. And to put a little bit of an exclamation point on this, as more forces are rolling into the region, the bombardments, airstrikes, missile strikes, helicopters coming in and doing close air support on the Russian side has not ceased either. We haven't had a lot of footage of it lately, as it's been focused on some other areas. But we do have some videos today of Russian helicopters operating in the areas around Donetsk.
Видишь их?
And I think this video also kind of highlights what I was talking about. You can tell, not only are we seeing these Russian helicopters flying, but you can see just the difference in terrain. It's rolling, open farmland as opposed to urban, heavily forested areas. So that's so not only are we seeing those Russian helicopters still operating, but this really gives you good ideas where this fight's going to be taking place as opposed to where we've seen for the last month or so. And down near Mariupol, we've reported on the fact that Aiden Aslan, who is also known as Cossack Grundy, or he was also with the YPG in Syria, which is the Kurdish forces that were U.S. backed in Syria. And he fought along the 36th Marine Brigade here in Mariupol. He did surrender to Russian forces along with an unknown amount of Ukrainian troops. Russia reported that roughly 1,046 Ukrainian Marines surrendered. Those numbers have not been confirmed by the Ukrainian side. However, today it looks like that he appeared on Russian state media, but not before it appeared that he had been interrogated, is the correct word, by Russian forces, and he does look a little worse for wear from some rather fresh injuries he's received prior to this interview. So we'll go ahead and take a look. One of these is from Russian state media.
Я знаю, как говорит 50-50.
Скажите мне, вы убивали людей?
Did you kill people?
I don't know.
Почему? Why?
I didn't do any fighting.
Вы видели, чтобы при вас убивали людей?
So he is a little worse for wear. And we do also have a photo that was posted from some of his friends here on his Twitter account. And he did get, you can see, pretty beat up. He has gone through a lot, to be fair. He did go through, at this point, what appears to be 48 days of fighting in Mariupol. And now he's currently in Russian captivity as being used as a photo op. In a kind of a promotion video for Russian forces as a victory here. But that's not the only thing we have coming out of Mariupol. Today, we're getting something that we haven't seen yet on the channel, and that is Maxar satellite imagery. Now, Maxar satellites are rather expensive to use, which is why we don't have one. This is used by governments around the world. It's used by large firms and news stations who can actually afford to use them because it costs thousands of dollars to get this. And we can see live images. This is coming from Getty Images of the Maxar satellite footage of the Azovstal metalworks site. So this is in Mariupol. This is the Azovstal. As we can see, if I go back over here to the map, this is where we're looking at, is right here. And we can see the level of destruction that has occurred here. If you take a look, doesn't zoom in very well, but we can see the impacts from the large amount of bombardment. We can see the absolutely leveled civilian residential areas all around this site. And fire's still burning, of course. But this is an immense amount of destruction. This really kind of gives you an idea of where this fighting is actually taking place here on the ground, and how immense this structure is. These are those high-rise Soviet-era apartment blocks that we've seen getting destroyed all across the country, and especially in Mariupol. That is what these are, and this is the size of the metalworks. And for those that have never really seen what the inside of metalworks facility is like. It deals with a lot of hot metal, like molten metal. So everything is thick steel and brick and very strong, durable materials that all of it is essentially bullet and blast proof. Because it has to be to deal with those levels of temperatures, which made this a very strategic hard point for Ukrainian forces to defend. And not only that, but through this imagery, we can see we can see here, up here as well along this roadway, that they have destroyed the bridges strategically to impede Russian advancement across those rivers. We could see actually yesterday where there was an ATGM that destroyed a BMP on video there for us across the river near the Azovstal. And so that's kind of where we're seeing all this fighting going on. This is where those Ukrainian Marines were surrendering and trying to get out and link up with the Azov forces. This is where a lot of the fighting has taken place. And the amount of destruction there is... We've seen it from the ground level, but to see it from the air really gives you kind of an idea of just... When I said flattened yesterday, I truly meant it. And over here in Kherson, we have more bombardments on that we saw near Chornobivka. And Chornobivka is near the Kherson International Airport. This has been used by Russian forces as a staging base after this area was successfully taken over, and they pushed the front further towards Mykolaiv. And they moved in large numbers of helicopter forces. I believe it's the 7th Air Assault Force was moved in here, the 7th Air Assault Regiment. And they've been using this as an ammunition depot as well. Their helicopter fleet did move out of this area, but the ammunition has remained, and that appears to be what Ukrainian forces have been shelling over the last 48 hours. And we've seen multiple bombardments happening in this region. They were seen from Kherson, and this comes as Ukrainian forces continue to push their counteroffensive. We haven't moved any of this. We haven't moved this battle line yet. However, we do know that likely it has moved closer to Kherson, simply because of a lack of information. The information goes... There seems to be a lack of information for a long period of time as Ukrainian forces are on the move. And then it goes quiet. And when they are, it goes quiet. And then after some period of time, usually we've seen a couple days, we've seen a couple weeks, that point, a lot of information comes out all at once. So it's been a while now. We haven't had a lot coming out of here other than what was getting reported from citizens inside of Russian-occupied areas. And so we actually have a video today of more bombardment there.
Хуярить, хуярить их, сука. Вот это пизду, блядь. Ти шо, от это там їх упалили, єбать, іще дали, єбануться. Зараз іще буде, блядь, феєрверк.
And we're going to go ahead and cut it short here, but this goes on for another minute. So these are not short bombardments. There's a lot of munitions being thrown at essentially wiping the Kherson airport off of the face of the earth, to make sure that nothing is left there that the Russians could possibly use as Ukrainian forces continue to push further and further towards Kherson. I'm sure this battle line will move once that kind of break in radio silence happens. And today we actually have a correction of a correction of a correction. Yesterday, we reported the Moskva sunk, and the Moskva is a Russian ballistic missile cruiser that was hit reportedly by 2 Ukrainian Neptune anti-ship missiles out of Odessa. This is the ship that was told to go screw itself by the defenders of Snake Island. And it's also the flagship of the Black Fleet, of the Black Sea Fleet. And so yesterday reported it as sunk. Today it came out, and I said, oh man, we're going to have to correct the fact that this thing has not sunk. So I kind of felt like an idiot that I reported that yesterday, of course. But it was damaged, and it was being towed back to Sevastopol. And then, not more than a few hours ago, right before the stream started, we got information that the ship had actually did sink. It sunk while under tow back to Sevastopol in the choppy seas as there was a storm moving into that area. And I also received some footage off of the coast from the mainland of where you could actually see the ship burning last night when it was hit. And so we have that here for you. That is reportedly the Moskva burning offshore in the Black Sea. That is coming from roughly the Odessa area. And burning nice and bright. What happened is reportedly a fire started on board. Russia has not said that it was hit. Ukraine says they hit it with 2 Neptune anti-ship missiles, which were only put in service last year. And they, however, that fire led into the powder magazine of the ship, which detonated the ship's ammunition. This caused absolute destruction of the hull of the vessel. They attempted to save it, and she finally started to list too bad and began to go down while under tow, and she had to be broken from her lines. And we can see here, coming from Russian media or from Russian news sources, in fact, the Moskva cruiser sank while being towed in a storm. Coming from the Russian Defense Ministry. And we also have to show you how hard this effort was and what they're up against. These are actually the wind patterns in the storm forecast over the Black Sea at the time that the ship was currently under fire and sinking. So they were not able to save the ship. The rescue of the surviving crew, they say that they took no losses. However, your powder magazine detonating aboard ship usually means that there are significant losses. So we're going to say that there's probably some unconfirmed number of losses there. It took several hours for rescue for them. It was very difficult. The seas there were pretty large swells going there in the sea that made it very difficult for rescue boats to actually reach the location of the ship. And once again, it finally succumbed to that last night and now is laying nice and peacefully at the bottom of the Black Sea. And this is a big thing for Ukraine. Regardless of how the ship sank, the Moskva is one of the only blue water ships that Russia has. Everything else in its navy is relatively small. And not only that, but it was a major part of their air defenses. The air defense capability of the Moskva was able to cover essentially the entirety of Ukraine and keep aircraft from traveling all over the airspace. Clear up into Belarus, Poland, of course Romania and Moldova, and Russia itself. They could cover this entire airspace with just that one ship. And now that is gone. And with that, we're actually going to immediately roll into the international news because I think we're seeing the repercussions of that today. Because here in Klimovo, we can see that there were bombardments either in or around the city by what is reportedly Russian or Ukrainian forces. So this isn't the only report we've gotten, but we can see that there are currently bombardments going on. This is in Russia. Same thing, if we go over here, we can see in Belgorod, the authorities are saying this is a large patch of reeds that caught fire. However, This isn't the first time we've seen Belgorod hit by Ukrainian forces, and it is currently believed that that is actually another oil storage facility that has officially been hit. And if it is reeds, it's one big patch of reeds. Let me tell you. And then we also see shelling near Zervaleka, which, once again, it's in this Kharkiv region. Not surprising at all. It is just across the border. I mean, just across the border. So we know there are likely Russian forces in this area as they are continuing that assault on Kharkiv. But we see even more shelling here inside of Russia, which is something that Ukraine, up until this point, has only done some limited strikes. Today, they seem to have kind of taken the gloves off.
Пиздец, Журавлевки бой. Охуеть.
So that has been a pretty big escalation in attacks on Russian soil by Ukraine. We can assume that these are by Ukraine, unless they are what has been called by the international community as false flags incidents, which we believe there may have been some in Belgorod, whether they were duds, but early on, right after the oil facility attack by 2 Ukrainian Mi-24 helicopters, there were some missiles that impacted near some roadways just outside Belgorod that appeared to have been fired from Russian soil. We can't confirm any of that, of course, but it could have been false flags incidents, but there's currently 3 of them. So questionable at best. These may have been Ukrainian. No one has taken responsibility at this point, but considering they're currently at war, it seems a good possibility. However, nukes are on the move. The ICBM launchers, also known as the MAZ 7917 or 7917s, were seen loaded onto train cars in Ivanovo, Russia, where they were being transported to an unknown location. We don't know if this is going up towards Finland as a deterrent, as Finland and Sweden both seek to join NATO. If they're going over to Belarus to further act as a deterrent against the Western powers, including NATO and NATO-aligned countries, or if these are going to the Ukrainian border in order to escalate tensions as the offensive continues, or it may even be used as a reasonable option, as according to Russian doctrine, which we currently do have a copy of coming from the Russian embassy. The Russian doctrine does say that tactical nuclear warheads, which have a much smaller yield than that of an intercontinental ballistic missile, is actually considered reasonable use, including during a battlefield scenario under special circumstances, including the large-scale tactical retreat of Russian forces. So we do know that it is well within Russia's ideology to use at least tactical nuclear warheads. However, these are intercontinental ballistic missile launchers. So we see these, once again, in Ivanovo, Russia, being transported on rail car. And so, not a small escalation. Now, a little over a month ago, I believe now, Russia did say it was putting its intercontinental ballistic and its nuclear arsenal on high alert. However, there wasn't any observable changes in the Russian posture regarding their nuclear sites. In fact, they didn't even see any that had moved. Now, some of the batteries that we have seen being moved and used in Ukraine and positioned in Belarus are nuclear capable. However, they are not believed to be carrying any kind of nuclear warheads with them as munitions, just carrying what we would consider normal munitions that would be used in standard type of warfare, not necessarily a nuclear payload. However, it's not the only thing we're seeing coming out of Russia. We're also seeing that even more Russian equipment is getting moved through Kazan, which is over on the other side of Moscow. And this includes things such as armored vehicles, logistical vehicles, and anything else that you could think Russia would need as it's building up its forces in the Donbass to continue that offensive. And we do believe this may be either coming in to replace losses once the offensive begins, because it is set to begin here within the next couple of days. However, this may arrive in time. We will just have to see. And as we can see here, lots of Kamza, or Kamaz, I should say, trucks. There's a Tiger. I'm sure these are also filled with munitions, maybe even troops and equipment. But we do know that there's a large number of Russian equipment on its way, either already arriving in Ukraine as we speak, or on its way to the Ukrainian front. We've seen them also pull a lot of civilian vehicles, one, and two, we've seen them pull a lot of stuff out of their storage. And we've seen even plain T-72 tanks. We've seen T-64s, T-62s. We've seen old generation tanks that at this point are considered obsolete. In fact, a lot of weapon systems that are considered obsolete at this point by the Russian military, as they've attempted to modernize over the last about decade, since the fall of the Soviet Union. So, kind of concerning. However, it does show a little bit of weakness. Russia was expecting for Kiev to fall in what appeared to be 3 to 5 days. They were not initially prepared for a long, drawn-out conflict. However, at this point, it has been perceived that this could go on for weeks, or it could go on for months, or even years. So, regardless of the outcome, this may become a much longer, more prolonged conflict in the end. We've seen the first phase of the war took months, and it was always realistically, and this is also coming from the State Department here in the United States, they said that while his initial phase of trying to take Kyiv and those northern areas was measured in weeks and would always be measured in weeks, this offensive here, it will be months. It's not the only thing. Cars, which participated reportedly in the pro-Russian rallies in Berlin a little while ago, were burned by pro-Ukrainian activists today. We actually have a video of that.
Впереди, товарищ.
Спалили.
Спалили.
Нифига себе.
Сейчас я открою. Вот возле моего дома такие происходят.
Обалдеть. Ребят, мне понравилось, что снимаю.
Впереди.
This comes as tensions across Europe continue to rise daily regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Reports coming out of Ukraine of different atrocities across the country have left the world in rather a state of shock, and to the point that a lot of political leaders have changed their minds. It's also reported that Europe may be drafting a resolution to cut off Russian gas as long as in the meantime they can secure other contracts with other nations not affiliated with Russia. And that seems to be an ongoing thing that is really keeping Germany from being able to back cutting off Russian gas, as Europe actually imports $1 billion worth of Russian gas per day. And likewise, Ukraine has received roughly $1 billion total from Europe in support militarily. So it would be a big hit to Moscow. However, Moscow itself has also stated that they were looking to expand their influence and their energy sector eastward They were not looking to expand into Europe more because of the hostilities at this point that are developing between East and West once again. And as we move into the Middle East, we can see that Syrian Special Services agents were detained near Idlib by a faction of militants. Now, the thing about Syria is the fact that it is very contested. In fact, Aleppo and Idlib are highly contested between Turkish forces, pro-Turkish forces, pro-Assad regime forces, SDF forces, pro-democratic forces, Islamic extremists, Russian forces also are in the area. There's only about 40 different groups fighting each other inside of Syria. In fact, it's probably one of the most complicated conflicts in human history. In fact, if anyone studies World War I and knows how kind of a cluster of nations and weird alliances caused that to happen, Syria is that, but about tenfold inside a much smaller region. However, these individuals were identified on the fact that they were carrying Soviet weapons and Soviet arms, specifically ones that have been issued to special service agents in the area. So we do not know what is happening currently to those agents other than the fact that they were detained. But also coming out of Damascus and in Syria is the fact that Israel reportedly conducted airstrikes outside the city. In fact, as many as 6 different separate airstrikes in the city, or in just around the city of Damascus, which is the capital of Syria. This comes after some recent tensions between Islamic State fighters who had tried to join the Islamic State in Syria, conducted several terror attacks, including in Hadera and in Tel Aviv, and as rising tensions with in the Palestine's West Bank and the Gaza Strip, including a raid today that we could not confirm occurred. However, reportedly there were several casualties. And also as rockets have been fired in this border region, whether it was coming from Lebanon or Syria is not known. However, we do know that what appears to be Israeli airstrikes were occurring, and there was some pretty impressive footage happening out of there today.
אילי, בוא תראה אותם, אילי. וואי. שם האור המהבהב.
זה? האור הזה?
מהבהב.
הנה
הם עולים למעלה. אתה רואה?
הנה עוד אחד, שמה.
2.
שתיים עולים
אתה רואה אותם אילי? 2?
And so we can't confirm that Israel did conduct these airstrikes. Israeli government has not said anything regarding them at this point. However, this would not be the first time that Israel has conducted airstrikes in Syria. In fact, they hit several installations, including airfields and air defense facilities, and reported weapons or chemical weapons facilities inside the country of Syria earlier in, I believe, about 2016. And 2015, as well, going along with American and coalition airstrikes throughout the region and in the country in order to cripple Assad's ability to use chemical weapons after they were used on civilian populations, including on areas such as Aleppo, Idlib, and throughout the Middle Euphrates River Delta. And that's not the only thing happening in the region regarding the rising escalations. Coalition supply convoys have also been attacked. In fact, a group today called the Ashab al-Khaf, which is a member of the, or which is one of the public, PMF's Popular Mobilization Forces. Sorry, I was trying to think of the word there. Kataib Hezbollah also falls within this realm. This is something that has been Iranian backed. They are Iranian backed. Kataib Hezbollah is Iranian backed. The Sadr, I think they're called the Sadr Group or the Peace Brigade, is also backed. They are the same kind of individuals that conducted the protests at the Baghdad embassy compound in 2020 that was then followed up by multiple rocket strikes for roughly a month after. But today they did take responsibility for IED attacks on coalition supply convoys, and we have a video of that today. We'll go ahead and take a look here. We're going to go ahead and mute that. But this isn't the first time, and it won't be the last. Yeah, actually, these guys were, in fact, at the embassy. I can tell you that personally. But not necessarily all large IEDs, but nonetheless, IEDs are something that are extremely common in this region. In fact, there are two different variants. You have your standard IED, which is an improvised explosive device. And those can be strapped to, they can be placed on the roadside. There's different initiation systems for them to set them off. They can be used with people. They can be used with vehicles. But you also have something called an IEP. And an IEP is actually responsible for, IEPs are what's actually responsible for several coalition deaths in the region. It's also known as an improvised explosive projectile. It's basically a shaped charge version of the IED that has even proven to be able to punch through some of those MRAP armor, which is meant to actually protect against IED blasts. Those were developed as a result of shortcomings that were seen in vehicles such as the Humvee during the invasion and following occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan. And as we speak about Afghanistan here, the Taliban and Iran held talks today in Mazar-e-Sharif, as this comes the day after the suppression of rioters outside of the Iranian embassy in the city, after there has been a lot of anti-Afghan sentiments coming out of the country of Iran that the Iranian law enforcement, essentially, and the government has kind of turned a blind eye to. There were a lot of refugees coming out of Afghanistan, both during, of course, the 20-year-long war and occupation, but also in the follow-on as the country fell and the collapse of the government. A lot of people tried to flee, and they fled across the border into their neighbor of Iran, but they have not necessarily been treated well. And there's been a lot of reports of different types of anti-Afghan sentiments, including some protests against them being there, including they've been singled out as a group, essentially. And so the Afghan people here in the country were actually protesting against that. However, the Taliban showed up and suppressed it. We do not know in what kind of status. The United Arab Emirates also sent Ukraine aid today. It apparently arrived in Poland. However, the UAE not only sent 50 tons of aid, but they also shipped several different fully equipped ambulances for first responders inside of Ukraine. This comes as many of their vehicles have been destroyed due to the shelling and the ongoing fighting. And so the UAE and other partners around the world continue to support both humanitarian and lethal aid to the country of Ukraine. And yesterday and the day before, we both reported early and then later confirmed that there were initially reported $750 million aid package that has been upgraded to an $800 million aid package going to Ukraine from the United States. That was announced by the Department of Defense in the White House yesterday. And we're also seeing large amounts of equipment coming out of places such as Czechia, Slovakia, Estonia, Germany, Poland, and many others. As we start moving towards Asia here, we saw that some militants were killed up near Shopian, which is in the Jammu and Kashmir regions, which is the disputed territory between India and Pakistan that is jointly occupied. Indian law enforcement and security forces killed 4 of the militants of a pro-Pakistani group called Lashkar-e-Taiba. And this is after they had discovered the house that they were hiding in. These militants were reportedly responsible for multiple attacks on law enforcement, civilian, and also several terror attacks as well. And while none of the security forces or law enforcement received injuries during the raid, 3 were killed and several others injured after a vehicle accident while en route. Tropical storm Maggie continues to ravage the country of the Philippines after making landfall. And this is something that we received from CNN earlier. But the tropical storm has actually so far caused at least 76 people to lose their lives, and thousands of others have been displaced after severe flooding and landslides have absolutely just devastated the region. There are reports of people that are missing. We do not have an accurate number for that, as well as an accurate number for those that are currently displaced. However, more information will be forthcoming in the following days and weeks as the cleanup begins following the tropical storm. And in Shanghai, the protests and now even forced evictions continue. Now, Shanghai was put into a major lockdown after China imposed a zero COVID policy, which obviously hasn't been working because they reported in a single day 21,000 cases of COVID-19 in China's second largest city, and put it into a very strict lockdown. They did not give any warning to this, and so a lot of people were unable to go get essentials, including food, toiletries, etc., to last them the duration. And that they have been told that they are unable to leave their homes and apartments for any reason whatsoever. And this has led to food riots. We've seen looting going on, which we've reported on over the last couple of days. And we've also seen as Chinese troops bringing in, including even armored vehicles, to quell the unrest. And I'm not talking like MRAP's, riot police armored vehicles. I'm talking about like tanks and anti-aircraft systems. Similar things to what we saw in the city of Hong Kong when the pro-democracy protests were happening there. And so we have more of that today. However, a new development within the city is the fact that many residents, hundreds of them in fact, were actually told that they were being ordered and forcefully evicted from their homes as the Chinese government took control of it and is going to be turning it into a quarantine site. And so we have several other videos of that going on today. Get much of the same, and today we also can see those evictions going on. So as we can see, the situation in Shanghai continues to deteriorate. And as we move... Sorry, I almost forgot. The only thing that we had coming out of Africa today is more developments regarding the situation in South Africa. And South Africa, so we received this from Al Jazeera, has been going through a large amount of floods after some torrential rains. And this has led to severe flooding, even landslides that have caused thousands to be displaced at this point. And the death toll has now raised to 341. Many are still missing and unaccounted for. However, the flooding continues, and many of them are currently presumed to be dead. So we'll have to see in the coming days and weeks, much like the situation in the Philippines, as those pass and as they are able to conduct some cleanup efforts. I'm sure we will be able to get more accurate information on the situation on the ground. And in the United States today, coming out of Buffalo, New York, a historic museum ship, the USS Sullivan's, has started to sink. This comes overnight. Within the last 24 hours, the ship has taken on heavy amounts of water. The ship is a Fletcher-class destroyer from World War II, and she's named after the 5 Sullivan brothers, whom all perished aboard the USS Juno when it went down during the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1942. It's not entirely clear exactly how bad the breach is, but the thickness of a Fletcher-class destroyer's hull is not very big. They were built to be fast, and they were built to be maneuverable. They were not built to be very strong. In fact, that the hull's at the hull's thickest part, it is 3/8 of an inch thick of steel. So they were not built much like a battleship would be, such as the USS New Jersey. But it's been a museum ship for years, and we have some photos coming out of there showing just how bad it is. We're not sure if she is resting on the bottom of the riverbed, or if currently she is being held up along this pier here. But as we can see, she's taken on massive amounts of water, and she is at a rather severe list. Divers have been in the water to inspect the breach thus far. However, that report hasn't come out. They are attempting to pump water out of the ship, but it's currently not known exactly what the extent of the full damage is at this point, what the stresses on the ship currently are, as it is an older vessel. This comes as Monday was supposed to begin the next round of repairs on the ship to deal with some of these issues, including some extra ingresses of water. And so rather poor timing, it seems, for the ship to be going down at this point. There were some repairs done prior to the off season, and this comes after over $1 million was raised for repairs on the ship through donations. So we'll have to see the extent. The likelihood that she'll be able to get in dry dock and repaired immediately is not very good, as the USS Texas has been waiting for years to get into dry dock, not for the lack of funds, but for a lack of a dry dock to actually support repairs badly needed on the ship. And finally today, we have another interesting thing of news, and this is how we always want to try and wrap up the day. And today, in some of Hubble's archived footage, they actually discovered some interesting images, and it is of a supermassive black hole, but it's of kind of a precursor supermassive black hole, if that makes sense. In fact, the light from this is so old that the images are shown because of how long it took the light to reach the telescope, actually give us a window of what is estimated to be about 750 million years after the Big Bang. To give you an idea, it took 3.4 billion years for the Earth to form after the Big Bang. Estimated. Roughly 3.4 billion years. So this is 750 million years after the Big Bang. Is the closest to the Big Bang we've ever been able to observe. And so far, they're still estimating this. It may blink how some theories currently ongoing with supermassive black holes and galaxies and their formations and destructions. We'll have to see going forward, but it is rather interesting news. I mean, you can actually see this coming from Hubble, ESA Hubble. And there is the photo for you, or the image regarding this. So, rather cool. It's kind of cool to be able to see things like this, and there's been a lot of really cool developments lately regarding the oldest or the largest thing that we've thus far seen in space. And so I'm really happy that we're able to continue seeing all of these developments in the world. It's always also nice to end the night on a good note. And so I'm very happy to say that there's been a lot of good developments today. There's been some tragic ones as well. What's going on in South Africa, in the Philippines, and of course those bombardments in Ukraine and the continual loss of life, and the stuff going on in Somalia. All of those are rather tragic, but today overall, in terms of news, has either been very good for Ukraine, or there's been some good developments in the world or in science that we can see going on. And hopefully that trend continues. And hopefully the news continues to get a little bit more uplifting than depressing. So with that, we have wrapped up all of the daily news review in the world today. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe on the video and on the channel. We absolutely appreciate it because it helps us reach out to more people. We want it to be an unbiased and apolitical news source to the best of our ability anyway. And we want to be able to be a continual force for good. And without your support, we'll never be able to do that. We want to be able to have fundraisers on every single stream we do. We're never going to be monetizing this to take money from the community. We want to be able to give that money and make sure it goes to where people actually are going to need it. And so with that, make sure you check out the links in the description. If you can't give a lot, give a little. Everything helps, and there's a lot of things going on in the world that could use a little bit of good put back into them. Ethiopia and Ukraine are in dire situations right now, and for humanitarian reasons, for the reason of war, and they need our support now more than ever. So once again, if you can't give a lot, give a little. And other than that, I will have nothing else for you guys for today. If you want to join our community, you can do so. The link for the Discord is in the description below as well. So come check us out. We chat with everyone else. Currently, we're sitting about 30-something people, so we've grown rather significantly over the last few weeks. And so I'm very appreciative of everyone. I'm very appreciative of the staff team that helps put this together. I wouldn't be able to do it without them. And so with that, my name is Paul. It has been a pleasure hosting for the night, and I hope to see you guys once again tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Good night.